responsible for the death of one of the French officers. As they negotiated the terms for the peace treaty between the British royal troops and the American regulars and the French troops, no one on the American or British side read or spoke French. And the Frenchmen inserted into the treaty that it was George Washington who had assassinated a French officer. And that began the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War. England spent a tremendous amount of treasure and resources defending the wilderness colonies across the Atlantic Ocean. As the English Treasury realized that we've lost money on this and we need to recoup the money, they thought the best way to do it was to raise taxes on the colonists. At first, they incorporated a stamp tax, which was a consumption tax, which the colonists did not object to. And then they thought we need more revenue, so they instituted a stamp tax. Now, the problem with a stamp tax was this. It was a tax on the people that you wanted least likely want to tax. It was the attorneys. Every document, every will, every marriage certificate, every death certificate had to have a royal stamp on it. And as you know, attorneys are always willing to sue anyone. The second group of people that this offended the most were the printers. Every single newspaper, every single publication, tract, or pamphlet had to have a stamp of the royal crown on it. And you don't want to offend people who buy ink by the barrel. And so this was a tremendous mistake on the part of the English government. Well, when the stamp tax was enacted, the New England stamp collectors lined up getting ready to start collecting the taxes. When Patrick Henry saw this, he stood up before the House of Burgesses, and he made a famous speech against the stamp tax. And in the course of the speech, he made the statement, Caesar had his Brutus, Charles had his Cromwell, and George III, and he paused, and many of the Anglican members of the House of Burgesses started to cry out, treason, treason. Patrick Henry paused and then said, and George III would learn well from their example. But if this be treason, make the most of it. Patrick Henry spoke against the taxes that were there, and within weeks, all over the colonies, his speech had been translated and reprinted in the newspapers. Within 3 months, the papers in England and Scotland had reprinted his speech. The tax collectors in the colonies quit, or they were tarred and feathered. They were afraid to go out and actually do their job. The governor of Williamsburg suspended Parliament. The British Marines seized the armory, the garrison at Williamsburg. The House of Burgesses met 30 miles north to be out of the reach of the governor of Virginia. They went to the largest hall they could find, St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. And it was on this day, March 23rd, 1775, that Patrick Henry, delivered the following oration. Mr. President, no man thinks more highly than I do of the patriotism, as well as the abilities of the very worthy gentlemen who have just addressed the House. But different men often see the same subject in different lights. And therefore, I hope it will not be thought disrespectful to these gentlemen if, entertaining as I do opinions of a character very opposite of theirs, I shall set forth my sentiments freely and without reserve. This is no time for ceremony. The question before the House is one of awful moment to our country. For my own part, I consider it nothing less than a question of freedom or slavery. And in proportion to the magnitude of the subject ought to be the freedom of the debate. It is only in this way that we can hope to arrive at the truth and fulfill the great responsibility that we owe to God and our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time as this, through fear of giving offense, then I should consider myself guilty of treason toward my country and an act of disloyalty to the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. Mr. President, it is natural for man to indulge in the illusions of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against the painful truth, to listen to the song of the siren until she transforms us into beasts. Is this the part of wise men engaged in the great and arduous struggle for liberty? Are we disposed to be the number of those who, having eyes, see not, and having ears, hear not, those things which so nearly concern our temporal salvation? For my own part, however great the anguish of the spirit it may cost, I am willing to know the whole truth, to know the worst and provide for it. I have but one lamp by which my feet are guided, and that is the lamp of experience. I know of no way of judging the future but by the past, and judging by the past, I wish to know what has been in the conduct of the British ministry for the last 10 years to justify these hopes with which gentlemen are pleased to solace themselves in this House. Is it that insidious smile, sir, with which our petition has been so lately received? Trust it not, sir, it will prove a snare unto your feet. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. Ask yourselves how this gracious reception of our petition comports with these warlike preparations which cover our waters and darken our lands. Are fleets and armies necessary for a work of love and reconciliation? Have we shown ourselves so unwilling to be reconciled that force must now be called in to win back our love? Let us not deceive ourselves. These are the implements of war and subjugation, the last arguments to which kings resort. Dare I ask, sir, gentlemen, what means this martial array if its purpose be not to force us into submission and slavery? Can gentlemen assign any other motive to it? Has Great Britain any enemy in this quarter of the world to call for all this accumulation of armies and navies? No, sir, she has none. They are meant for us. They can be meant for no other. They are sent over to bind and rivet upon us those chains with which the British ministry has been so long forging. And what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. And do we have anything new to offer upon the subject? Nothing. We have held the subject up in every light in which it is capable, but it has all been in vain. Shall we resort to treaty and humble supplication? What terms shall we find which have not already been exhausted? Let us not, I beseech you, sirs, deceive ourselves any longer. We have done everything we can to avert the storm which is now coming on. We have petitioned. We have remonstrated. We have supplicated. We have prostrated ourselves before the throne and implored the interposition to arrest the tyrannical hands of the Ministry of Parliament. Our petitions have been slighted. Our remonstrances produced additional violence and insult. Our supplications have been disregarded, and we have been spurned with contempt at the very foot of the throne. In vain, after these things, may we indulge in the fond hope of peace and reconciliation. It is vain to expect relief from a king who's become a tyrant, a fool, a puppet. There can no longer any hope be invested in the British people. There are no Britons, no Scotsmen, no Englishmen, only a set of wretches sunk in luxury who've lost their natural courage and cannot look the brave Americans in the face. Gentlemen, there is no longer any ground for hope. If we wish to be free, if we wish to preserve inviolate those inestimable privileges which belong to us as free men, if we mean not to basely abandon the noble struggle with which we have been so long engaged, in which we have pledged ourselves never to abandon until the glorious object of our struggle be obtained, then we must fight. I repeat it, sir, we must fight. An appeal to arms and to the God of hosts is all we have left to us. They tell us, sir, that we are weak, unable to cope with so powerful an adversary. But when shall we be stronger? Will it be the next week or the next year? Will it be when we are totally disarmed and a British guard shall be stationed in every house? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our backs, hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies have bound us hand and foot? Sir, we are not weak. If we make a proper use of those means the God of nature hath placed in our power. 3 millions of people, armed in the holy cause of liberty, and in such a country that which we possess, are invincible by any force our enemies can send against us. Besides, sir, we shall not fight our battles alone. There is a just God who presides over the destinies of nations, who will raise up friends to fight our battles for us. The battle, sir, is not to the strong alone. It is to the vigilant, the active, the brave. Besides, sir, we have no election. Should we be base enough to desire it, it is now already too late to retire from the contest. There is no retreat but in submission and slavery. Our chains have been forged. Their clanking may be heard upon the plains of Boston. The war is inevitable, and let it come. I repeat it, sir, let it come. It is vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. The next gale that blows from the north shall bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? What is it that they wish? What would they have? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God! I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death.